getting rid of overdrive when you're going up a steep hill and it keeps shifting between, or going down a hill, shifting between high gear and low gear a little bit. You can change that. Now, I always recommend that you review the owner's manual that comes with it. This is an Allison's transmission. They have a whole little booklet that explains when and when not to do so. Read that little manual. It's going to tell you the proper ranges, speeds, RPMs, etc. Now, trying to think if I missed anything on that. All right, so to the right of the steering column is a button that's labeled dump and suspension. It's flashing right now. The dump suspension, this must be dumped before you do the leveling system. We're going to go over the leveling system a little bit separately because we got to pause and readjust the camera. But it does dump the rear air suspension. So one of the things we did use this for, and we'll kind of go back over, is when we loaded this onto the plane, we put the jacks, or we put the blocks underneath the frame, and we left about a ½ inch to an inch. It did help to dump the air suspension, so it lowered, so we don't have full ride height, dumps it down on top of those blocks, holds those blocks in place, and then you're not relying on the suspension at all. You're relying on frame to wood to the floor. So that's what the dump suspension button's for. Now, please be aware that when you flip this little dump air suspension, it will drop the rear. So you got to make sure you're clear all the way around before you ever push that button. When you do dump the air suspension, that of course does go to the standard air system of the actual vehicle. So if I hit dump, I let the jacks down, the next time I start the vehicle and I go to air it back up, it's going to take a little bit more time to air back up because it has to re-inflate the rear airbags. Now, they're fairly large airbags in the rear, so it takes a little bit of time. So as this thing was idling before we started the training, you're going to have to let it idle to fill back up. Now, the faster the RPMs are, the faster that air compressor is going to pump air into the vehicle. So a typical good setting you can hold it at is about the 1000 RPM range. That'll air it up fairly quick. What that also helps to do is when you're idling, letting these things air back up, running it at a higher RPM like that will help to burn some of the particulates out of the exhaust filter that's built in to the exhaust system. So going over the exhaust filter, there is a little rectangle right here on the dash, and it's labeled exhaust filter. As you drive this vehicle, you may notice a little light will come on inside that little exhaust filter. Typically, it looks like little vapor exhaust with little water droplets. It's a symbol for DEF fluid, kind of like what you see right here at the DEF gauge. It may also say something like exhaust filter full, something along that lines. It varies from vehicle to vehicle. Now, if you get that first little light on, you don't really need to panic, but what it indicates is that exhaust filter in the exhaust system is starting to back up with these particulates it collects, and you need to burn them out. To burn them out, you can do one of two things. You can put this thing at a higher idle while idling, run it up to about 1000 RPMs until that light goes away, or you can drive it at highway speeds. Now, I'm not saying that you have to do it immediately, but don't let it stay on there for too long. So if you're driving around the city or you're parked on a base and this thing's just idling at a low idle, it's going to keep filling up that filter with these particulates. After that first little light comes on, and let's say you ignore it, a secondary light will come on indicating you've got to do the fast idle right away or drive it at highway speeds, or else this thing is going to derate itself just like if you ran it out of DEF fluid. So once again, all of the international stuff right here on the dash is in the International Owner's Manual that comes with it. I would recommend, once again, that you highly review it, read through it, make copies of the pages, highlight important sections, because it's going to go really, really in-depth on when and when not, that kind of those kind of informational things. As I mentioned before, being that this is a diesel, you do need to let, when you go to start it, you do need to wait until all the lights on the dash go away before trying to start it. One of the most important ones is right here. We're showing a little light, and it looks like a curly spring. That is the symbol for the coils inside the engine. The glow plug's heating up. So what you do is you turn the key, wait until all the lights go away, specifically waiting until that little coil light goes away. If you don't wait until that light goes away, you're going to be cold starting the engine. It's extremely bad for the glow plugs, for the coil, for the engine itself. So just be aware of that. You need to wait till they go away. Now, part of warming this vehicle up, because you could be operating, and we'll go could be in cold climates, We also have the Wabato, I believe is how you pronounce it. It is a heater that is meant to heat up the coolant in the engine and circulate it before you even start the vehicle. It is diesel fired, so it does run off the diesel tank. I looked it up this morning. It should use about 0.4 gallons per hour when you run this little heater to keep the engine block warm. There is a little switch that will be labeled. It's right here beneath this filter minder, which I'll go over as well. All you gotta do is turn that on and you can see it lit up green. What it's gonna start doing is it's gonna start circulating the coolant, heating it up, and as he mentioned, you should be able to come up and feel it about 15 minutes later. The engine block should be nice and warm. It'll make it so starting in cold climates, it should start right up like it's nothing. We also have, beneath me, we'll go over when we walk around, we also have a plug-in for the engine block heater. Now it's right there, he's flipping it up. Now it only does, like you mentioned yesterday, the oil for the engine pan, so it's not going to do as good of a job as the little switch over here to the right, but it is a nice little function. You can power this thing up, run an extension cord from the vehicle itself if you want to, right to that little outlet. So while you're running throughout the day, it's keeping the engine block nice and warm. So it's pretty straightforward as well. The HVAC controls here on the dash are just for the dash area. I know you guys probably know this, but for future people, if you turn this on cold, it's not going to cool down the rear of the vehicle. I don't know I have to explain that, but I do. So you will notice that there is a norm and a max, and they're both little snowflake. Normal AC is just going to be standard AC. If you turn it to max, it's going to automatically start recirculating the air. It's going to blow a little bit faster, a little colder. Other than that, there's no real difference between them. We have four little red lights right in a row. They kind of look like buttons, but they are not buttons. They are lights. They're labeled slide outs deployed, mass deployed, step deployed, and leveling jacks deployed. If said application is in use and you turn the key on, that little light should light up. You will also get some sort of warning noise, especially with the jack system. Do not rely on those lights. They are lights. Lights can fail. It's still your responsibility as end users to know what is retracted, stowed, deployed, extended, etc., right? So even if the light's not on, it doesn't mean you can just drive away. I know you guys probably do it, and I'm going to give you the CDL little checklist. You got to walk around, physically make sure that the jacks have retracted. You got to make sure the steps are in, the slide outs are in. There are things you can do sometimes to actually start the vehicle and drive away with said, you know, the jacks down. It's possible sometimes. We have provided under the steering wheel another little silver switch right here. The vehicle will not start if the rear or the side steps are out, and typically it ties to your slide out systems as well. I haven't tested it as well to make sure, but I do know it works for the steps. If the steps are out or it says they're out and they're not actually out, you verified that they are away and it will not let you start, you can press and hold this little silver button and turn the key at the same time, and it will override that interlock. So just so you know where it's at, it's the silver one down here. Don't use it for the battery boost. Don't confuse it. If your label comes off, get a new label. Don't confuse it too, otherwise you're wasting your time. So beneath those four red lights, we have a button that's labeled retarder. It is for your exhaust brake. Now if I turn that on, next to that is a button that's labeled 1, 2, and 3. There are 3 settings to the exhaust retarder system, so you can set it at these different speeds to help slow the vehicle down. Now it is an auxiliary braking system. Once again, just like the cruise control, it's not a smart braking system. Accelerate like normal, brake like normal. It's going to help slow you down, but it will not stop the vehicle fully. It is good for going down hills. It's not good for stop and go traffic. You're wasting your diesel if you're using it for stop and go traffic. But going down hills, you can turn it to these different settings. If you release the gas pedal, even before you push the brake, it will automatically kick in to help start slowing the vehicle down. Once again, brake like normal if you feel like you're increasing speed more than this thing is slowing you down, and it will help once again to back that up. You'll notice the RPMs of the engine will increase quite a bit because it's using that back pressure to slow you down. Now there are a few limitations to it. Do not use the retarder if it is slippery outside, icy conditions, raining, gravel roads, anywhere that you could possibly skid. Because it's actually using the drivetrain to slow the vehicle down, it can cause those tires to kind of lock up in the rear if it's extremely slippery. So make sure you turn that back off. Now, you're probably not going to be in a lot of cities, but there are a lot of city laws and regulations. You notice when you drive into a town that says no exhaust brakes, no Jake brakes, no engine brakes. That's what they're talking about. Don't use it if the local laws and regulations say you can't. Otherwise, you technically could get a ticket. Just throwing that out there. Next to that is a button that says PDL. That is the lock to lock both rear axles together. As we experienced when we drove it on the plane, none of the tires left the ground. But if you were in a circumstance where you thought that it was possible that one of your axles in the rear could leave the ground, make sure you turn that on. You should be going at a low speed when you activate that. Don't do it when you're completely stopped. And you should not use it at high speeds.